what is the concept of job in Workday and position, and what are the characteristics of jobs, and how do we create a job profile, and how do we create a position. So that's not only the agenda, but I want to make sure that when we leave this session, we have an understanding of that. So let me begin with within any organization or company that has implemented Workday, assume they have already implemented Workday. Now we need to hire people into it. In order to do that hiring, where do we hire? So first thing is, before we hire someone, remember from our last session that we need to make sure that supervisory organization exists. So we need to hire within the soup org, and then the soup org needs to have a manager role assigned to make the process flow smoothly. I mean, obviously you could hire without a manager role assigned, but then there might be some hiccups in the approval process. Okay. And then in order to hire someone, we need to say, okay, what kind of job the person's going to have, and not only what the job title is going to be when we hire someone, but what is the overall profile and all the characteristics of that particular job. So my job is not just going to be a payroll analyst, but what's going to be my level, what is going to be my location, what is going to be my job's classification. So there's a lot of characteristics that go with the job profile. So all of that, while it's not required, it does help in order to organize the employee population or the contractor population. So since Workday is an organizational tool, you'll see that there's a lot of ways to organize the jobs and job profile data. And then in addition to having the job and job profile before we do the hiring, we need a salary. More importantly, we need to indicate what is the budget for this requisition, which is usually a range. So we need a place in Workday that will tell us, hey, what is the range for this particular position or for the job profile? And then is that range going to be different in different locations? So that is key. And then if we have a job in San Francisco for payroll analyst, and that job has characteristics, will those characteristics change if it was a Chicago-based job? And then do we need to create a separate job profile for it? Or can we just use the same job profile if all the characteristics are the same except for the salary? So we could see examples of that. And then if we're going to have, same job, same characteristics, but the salary is different between two different locations, how do we handle that within Workday? So that is typically handled by something called grade profiles. So there'll be a separate grade profile for San Francisco. Job profiles are part of job family, and so job family is just a group of job profiles. Then we'll see the job profiles, we'll see the related report around that, and then we'll learn how to create a job profile, and then we'll see how to create a position. And then when we're trying to create a position, before we do that, we should check the hire business process to make sure that all of those requirements that are part of the hire workflow in that business process, such as all the roles, you want to make sure that the organization that you're trying to hire into, it has all of those roles assigned. And you know who those roles belong to, so that when you're going through that approval process and you need to proxy as someone else, you know who to proxy in order to finish that business process for creating a position. Okay. So that's basically the theory behind what we're going to cover today. And so let me know if there's any questions around that. Okay. All right, so if not, then I will dive into my PowerPoint and we'll talk about that. Now, we did cover some of this PowerPoint last time, and I added some more slides to it, make sure that we understand the concept, because last time we were focused on what is a soup org and all the different scenarios that come into play with a soup org. Okay, so job profile is another critical aspect of Workday. Job profiles are used by positions and jobs, and job profiles describe the overall characteristics, and it can be assigned to multiple positions or workers. And it could have one-to-one relationship with a position, or it could have one-to-many relationships with a position. In Workday, on a implementation time, or when the company feels that they have grown large enough that they need to have what's called a job catalog, in that time on the business side, they will define the jobs and profiles, and that is usually called a job catalog project. So in that job catalog, there will be a job family group that's created. And then the job family groups would be like the overall functional area, like finance or human resources or IT security. This would be a group, or facilities. And then within that job family group, there would be different job families. So for example, within finance, there's accounting, budget, investment. So these are the separate categories. And then there would be the job profiles within the job families. So as the Workday folks, we're not responsible to go and do the research to what is a job family group or to come up with it. But we need to know that, hey, these are the words and the terminology that the business will use. And if they're new to Workday, they would need your help in trying to understand what is the job structure in Workday. And they also like, okay, how do I define jobs in Workday? So what I'm showing you on the screen is how the jobs are organized and defined within Workday. So you tell them there's job family group, job families, and then job profiles, and then you create positions against the job profiles. Okay. So in general, what is a job catalog? Is the key element that organizes what is the hierarchy of jobs. The job catalog may include levels, titles, grades, any of the, and it is the foundation of all other areas of your Workday deployment, including talent recruiting, compensation, and succession planning. So this will feed into all the other systems. Not systems, but all the different functional areas within Workday. So you make sure you read that. Now within Workday, when we go to the job profile screen, these are the items that we will be seeing. So every job profile, it has an effective date, it has a job profile name, and a job code, and job title. It has a management level, job level. So, oops, the job level and management level, they help define the characteristics of the job. And then here is where you would enter the job family and the job category as well. They're not required fields for the job profile, but they're required to organize your data. Like if you want to have reports by job family, you need to have that data in here. And if you have job family here, then you could make eligibility rules or criteria based on that particular job family. And you see the fields called management level and job level. So the purpose of having these in here is to downstream systems could use these values for many purposes. Like for example, the approvals on the finance side. So when a purchase rec is put in or there's need to be some other approval, they usually assign how much you could approve based on a management level. So individual contributors, they could, perhaps approve up to $1,000. Managers could approve up to 2,000, or directors up to 5,000, etc. So those approvals are typically based on the management level, and the management level is defined on the job profile on the HR side, but it does flow to other functional areas. So that's just an example of where management level flows. In addition, there is job classifications. There are some US government mandated classifications for jobs that you put over here. In addition, if you need to create a new attribute or a new custom field, you could create your own job classification to help classify the jobs. And then you could also put in a job description. If you put a job description on this form, then when you create a job requisition or a position, and then the description that's entered here will flow into the position that you advertise on the front end. And now look, on that previous screen, we didn't see any area for the grade, but we'll see it in the demo because it'll be at a navigation right below that. But there is a concept of grades. So grades help define the level of the job profile a little bit more. And typically, if you have the same job profile, but in multiple geographic areas, the salary is going to be different. So for example, like I gave the example of San Francisco and Chicago, it's going to be the same job, but the person sitting there will have a different salary. So that's defined within a grade profile. So you have zone 1. Here's an example which will have a salary range. And in the system, we define what is the minimum and max. And then zone 2, that will have its own minimum and max. So grade E, is going to be tied to one job profile, but it will have 2 different zones. And these zones would be set up as grade profiles in the system. And we'll see that when we get into the demo. But just to be aware that within that structure of jobs, you also have what's called grades. And then within the grades, if they have different zones, they're called grade profiles, and you could define the grade profile based on the geographic location you're in. So this is more on the business side, but someone could ask you, like, why should we use grade levels or not? So there's some pros and cons to it. The min and max that you define at the grade level, they could be used in advanced compensation during, for example, the merit process, or they could be set up as guidelines during the hiring process so that recruiters or managers, they know what is the approved budget for this position, and they know, like, they need to stay within those guidelines when hiring someone, so that having that min max and the midpoint helps in the downstream functions, and it could be used in eligibility rules. The con is obviously there's a lot of maintenance. So for the companies that are large enough and they have a lot of grades and grade profiles, there's usually an annual project to update the ranges. So there's a lot of maintenance that goes along with having this data, because as the job market changes, you need to define and you need to price the jobs, or you need to update them at least once a year. Some companies update them twice a year, depending on how the job market is doing. So there's a lot of maintenance for it. And then in order to do the maintenance, in order to do the grade profile changes, we're going to talk later in our training, what's called EIB loads. And that allows you to change profiles data in a mass format. Okay. So a little bit more on the grade discussion. Most companies that do use them is because they're market pricing individual jobs. So that means that when they're looking for a payroll analyst, they're going to see, okay, what is the salary, or they'll do a salary survey in San Francisco, and they'll see, in San Francisco, this job is priced within this particular range, and for that they will create a grade, and the grade will be on a one-to-one basis with their particular job profile. But then if you do have different geographies with the same job, then you'll create profiles. So the highlighted part is the most common practice, at least in the US, where they market price. This is not Workday terminology, but you'll see the business discuss job, project using this kind of terminology, using words like market pricing, grades, and grade profiles. So it helps to be aware of that. Some companies may not be doing what we have in the green common arrow called market pricing. They just might have some bands. So those bands are also like grades. But as far as Workday is concerned, whether they're using what's called bands or they market price their jobs, if they do want to provide guidance, to the recruiter or to the manager on how much to pay for a particular job or what that expected salary range is going to be, on the Workday side, that data is kept within the grade, itself. And then if it needs to be broken down in both of these cases, based on geography, region, or zone, then it will be at the profile region, within the grade profile. So I'm just trying to make you aware of the keywords and the things that business will use to discuss a compensation or a job catalog project. You could definitely do more Google search on what is market pricing or what are grades, because while Workday helps to organize this data, this is really the HR partner area or the compensation area within the human resources domain. So there's a lot of material available on the internet from a functional point of view or from a HR partner point of view. So what is market pricing and what are grades? So all of the theory behind that. If your job is going to be focused on the HCM domain and helping companies set up their human resource HCM structure and the comp structure and the job catalog, then you should definitely study some more in depth about these ideas of grade bands and market pricing. Okay, so just an example of how we have a particular grade, we could call it account intermediate, and then you'll have a salary range for Chicago and a salary range for New York, and that data in Workday will be classified at the grade profile. So the ranges like Chicago and New York, they're at the grade profile, and this would be a grade. A lot of companies or a lot of end users that will ask you, hey, what is the format for the grade? But I mean, as the business, they would come up with the format, but if they don't know it themselves, they'll ask you for it, and then, but the grade format or how they're going to define the grades is actually it's actually really open on how they want to do it. You could have within the grade name, you could have the job, something that tells you what this job is about and the level. So in this case, we see accountant-intermediate, but we don't see anything that indicates this is a US job. So some companies will put US as a code before it or after it. So it could be like US accountant intermediate, or they could also just say US accountant M1, or they might say US accountant M2, so they may use codes. So it really depends on the company. The way the grade format is going to be different for every company. Some companies use numbers because they don't want to show what the grade is and what it means to the managers or anybody else. So it will just be a code, and then that code, on the HR side, they know what that code represents. They might have some number representing, they might have like US 1001 M3. And then that 1000 will represent all of the finance jobs. And then the 2000, if it was like US 2000 M3, that 2000 will represent all of the IT jobs. So when doing a job catalog project and a compensation restructuring, or even at initial time, if the business doesn't know it themselves and they're not familiar with it, they'll ask you on, hey, how do I define grades and how do I define the profiles? So this will help you in that kind of discussion. Before we actually create it into the system, a few more slides on this. Like I said, position is created within the context of supervisory org, and you need to have an open position before you can staff it. And posting title, number of positions, availability, and earliest hire date. These are the mandatory fields when we're going to create a position. And then obviously there's hiring restrictions, which we talked about, usually based on location. And then within the tenant, if you want your recruiters or anybody else to allow override of those restrictions, then within the tenant, you should uncheck or you should allow override of the restrictions. So it's best process to do allow override because so you could be flexible, and then as things change, you could continue the process without having bound by the hiring restrictions. When we're creating a particular job profile, and then when we create a position for it, on that position you could also set the default. which of course you will edit during the hire event. So, but if you add the compensation and all of the compensation elements during when you're creating that position, then it allows the approvers, the people downstream who's going to approve that position, to know what the recommended salary range is for this. So the navigation for that is going to be position, related action, and then you select comp, and then you choose the requested default compensation task. Okay. So now within the system, we'll view a job profile, and then we'll create a position. So give me a minute to log into the system. All right, so here I'm back in the training tenants. So let's look at those job profiles and positions. So here, since I'm logged in as Logan McNeil, but when you join, when you log into your tenant, I mentioned in my discussion notes that you have to do what's called start proxy. And when you do start proxy, you should enter Logan McNeil or any other person that you need to impersonate to continue the workflow. Because the person that you log in may not have all of the access, but Logan McNeil does. So you start proxy, enter Logan McNeil, and then you could also stop proxy as needed. So I'm going to look up a finance support. So here's finance and administration, and I'm going to go to someone, an employee within that, and then I'm going to use that to navigate into the job profile. So under jobs, and then under job details, is we have the job profile and the job family. And it shows over here based on what was entered. Okay. So let's see all the details that are entered against the job profile over here. And you could navigate to it by clicking on it. And I'm going to put it in edit mode. So here we have an effective date and then the job profile. And so we could see this as the kind of values that have been added and the format. So job profile and then the job code. When you create a job code, in your exercise, just go ahead and put your initials next to it. So then you could look it up later on saying that, okay, this is the one that you created, since multiple people will be creating the same job profile. Or you could also put your initials next to the job profile name. On some of the attributes, characteristics of a job profile, you can restrict it to a particular country. But if you do that, then you'll have to create a separate profile for the same job profile in another country. So a little bit more work if you do it that way. But you could definitely do that. And it might come up as a question like, hey, we want to do this, but we don't want this job to be available in another location. So you need to be aware of these fields, even though you may not use them very much in real life. Okay, so management level, and here's examples of the other management levels. At the highest is board of directors, CEO, and etc., all the way down to individual contributor. And individual IC is usually called IC. It just means the person who's an employee, but they don't have anybody reporting up to them, so they're an IC. Then there's job levels, job families. So let me show you the different examples of job families that are here. So everything from, based on the type of business, they will have different job families populated. So which see are, just an example in this tenant. if it's a non-exempt job and a work shift is required, you could click that. Uh, Public job visible to everybody. This characteristics such as difficult to fill. I mean, it's there. Don't really see much use for it. It shows up if you don't fill it out here. It shows up on the position screen. Someone has a question on the management level. Does it need to be created by us, or the options are available in Workday itself? No. So at the time of Workday implementation, the business will give you the list of management levels, and then you create them at that time. And then as time is we on the Workday levels. So it's kind of a list of values that's maintained. But the HR partner or the side, they don't usually get that. It's usually part of a project that the Workday team does or the Workday consultant does. In this example, the compensation grade is not populated. But in the real world, if they're using grades and grade profiles, we do select the compensation grade. So it could be an example of like management, and then you could select the appropriate grade for it. So here, they have defined grades based on the country. So there's a grade for, grade profile for U.S. California, U.S. Georgia, etc. A lot of companies will use codes or abbreviations. So it'll say M-California, M-Chicago. So the format of which you see as a grade and grade profile, don't be alarmed. Every company has a different format for it. Here, under the job exempt tab, this is critical for the US. You mark job as job exempt. By default, most jobs should be marked exempt unless it's an hourly job. The issue you'll run into with the exempt and non-exempt is rest of the world. They do not have this classification of exempt and non-exempt. Only the US does. So an example would be an executive administrative assistant. So any of the administrative assistant roles, or what's called admin assistant, in the US, they're considered non-exempt, but in the rest of the world, they're considered, they're by default, they're considered exempt. And the difference it makes on the Workday side is when a job is exempt, their salary is indicated by how much they get for the whole year. So on those fields where we indicate salary, is the annual amount. But if a job was non-exempt, then it's the hourly amount. When you have an admin assistant and you only have one job profile, but you're going to use that admin assistant job in UK and the US, it's not going to work, because for the admin job profile in the US, it needs to be marked as non-exempt. So you want to do is make sure that under here, you click on the plus button, and for all the other countries where you have that admin assistant job, you're going to choose that country, and you're going to mark job exempt. But for the US, you want to leave it unchecked. Otherwise, what's going to happen is on the salary screen or any of the reports for people who are not in the US, they'll or for people in the US, their compensation will be listed in not what it's supposed to be. So it might be listed as an annual figure when it's supposed to be an hourly in the US. On the business side, job exempt just means this person is exempt, or this job is exempt from overtime rules. So if you're looking for, what is the, how do we use this word terminology in like common English? they're exempt from some of the labor laws. So salaried workers, if I work, I typically work 8 hours, but if I have to work 10 hours, I'm exempt from getting paid overtime. So that's why in the US, any professional job is called an exempt job, because the company doesn't have to worry about paying you overtime. But if you work by the hour, then it's not an exempt job. Then then that job is not exempt from the labor time and some other conditions. Workers' comp code. These are comp codes that are used for annual reporting, but these are government mandated. So the values are consistent throughout Workday based on the country, because the actual workers' comp code values come from the US government, or they come from the Canadian government. The company may not have defined these. I mean, they may not have entered them in Workday, but they usually need to give a report to the government at the end of the year. And then if they don't have it in Workday, that means they're putting it in an Excel sheet and they're doing some manipulations outside of Workday. And the other relevant tab is education. If you enter any education requirements here, it will show up on the recruiting side as well. And if you don't, then you have to enter it when you're creating the position. Skills, work experience. So all of this data that goes into what is a job profile, and which goes into like how do we pay or how much we pay for that particular job, is kept over here. And then there's additional job classification field here. So this is a really good field, because a lot of times companies need to come up with some additional classification that they need to classify the jobs as. So within this field, we could create our own job classifications. So right now we're using what is the job classification that the government mandates. But if we need to classify differently, then we could, there's a task to create your own job classification. But here's an example of what's in the system already. I would need to know what the name is. For example, in my real tenant, like in all of the load files, I always use the keyword EIB at the end. So then I could search for EIB, and then it will give me, oh, actually there are some EIBs here. Okay. So when you create an EIB, here is EIB for, let's just take a look at edit position load. So if this is probably done because they needed to update the positions, some kind of mass update to it. So when you create this EIB, which we're going to learn later on, it's actually pretty simple to do that. Under actions, the data, always download a brand new template, because the template does change from company to company and from version to version. So you always want to come down over here and then generate a new template. And then if you do that, a new template will be generated, you'll get a notification, and then you download that, and then you'll populate that using the data that business gives you, and then you'll upload it using the integration launch. But yeah, to answer your question, the layout of that file of what actually gets uploaded into the system is defined by Workday, and it does change over time. So before I create a job profile, I do need to navigate to a supervisory organization. One key difference is though, and we haven't really talked about that, is when we type something in here in the search bar, there's multiple types of results and actions you could do. So you'll see that when we hire someone, it's a workflow, and that is called a business process. And but you'll see that when we create a job profile or anything that starts with create, so create job profile, this is listed as a task. So if you see something as a task, that means it's just something that you do directly on the screen and there's no approval or there's no business process behind it. You see the word is kind of in gray, so you see task. So just to be aware that when you have a task, there's no way to put an approval process. So when I'm creating a job profile, I cannot send it to someone else to approve. So I should have all the information up front, and when we create this job profile. Okay, so effective date is the earliest date that the job profile will be available. So we have to give a job profile name. So I'm going to just put my initials. Job code is usually defined by the business, and it'll have some meaning to it, just like department has a 4-digit code. So I'll just give it a random value. I know in our activity it says leave it blank, but yeah, go ahead, enter some value in it for. And then when we're displaying this, we could choose to have that job code displayed as part of the name, or you could not have it displayed. But since the end users, like the employees and the managers, they don't know what that job code is or what it means, so no point in displaying it there. A question is, can job profile date can be different than joining date of employee? Correct. The only caveat is that the job profile effective date must be earlier or equal to the position start date or the employee's date of hiring. But yeah, those are different, totally two different things. So I'm just going to fill out these fields. It'll take me a little bit of time. So the end user, when I'm talking about on the HR side, well, if we stay to what is the common definition of end user, is going to be the employees or contractors who are not in HR and they're not in Workday side. So, for example, someone who works in finance and they're a finance analyst or finance manager or facilities, they are the end users. So they cannot change any of these values over here. So their access is going to be, their role by default is just all employees, and they don't have any special access to change any of this. So those are the real end users. And then you have the HR folks. So for Workday purposes, HR folks are not considered the end users because HR folks are the ones who set up or create the items in here. So HR, if they have a role and they know how to create a profile, so someone from the HR team will create the job profile. But the values that they need, like management level or job families, these are done through a load file, especially if it's a reorganization project. In that case, it would be the Workday team. Now, the Workday team or the Workday individual, they could sit within the HR side, or they could sit within the IT side, depending on the company. So it's done both ways. Or you could have some aspects, some team members on the IT side, and some team members could be on the HR side. But let's call them the Workday folks, or sometimes it's called HRIS if they're sitting within the HR folks. But if they sit within IT, they're called HRIT. So the list of values or mass changes will be done by the HRIT folks. Or it could also be done by the HRIS folks, because both of these groups are people who are the Workday trained folks. And HR admin, while they do have access to do the load file, if you train them, some admins could do, these EIB load files, but they're typically pretty complex, and they, it takes a lot of back and forth and error fixing. So it's better to keep that within the HRIS or HRIT area, so the HR folks don't get frustrated with having to do the load files. We just need to make sure we click OK. So this is the one that I created right now. Okay, so now let me navigate to a particular supervisory org, and then we're going to look at the position creation process. So let me look at human resources. I know sometimes when we're now we're going to switch gears and we're going to create a position so we could hire someone in it. But I want to make sure that the supervisory organization that I use, it has all of the roles that are assigned to it, because I noticed when we create positions, and if if we have just created a position, it may not have all of the roles, and then the process will not flow. So that's why I'm searching for a soup org that has all of the roles already defined. So I think I'll be safe if I use an existing one. And I want to see who the roles are assigned to. So here in this case, the compensation partner is Logan, and the HR partner is Robert. Okay, so that's going to be a problem because in my tenant, I cannot proxy as someone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the role, and I'm going to make Logan the HR partner as well. So all of the approvals will just go to Logan, and I'm already logged in as Logan, so I could approve them without having to proxy anybody. And I also checked that it's position management staffing model. And I see here under unavailable to fill. So these are positions that have already been created, but they're not under staffing yet because either they're closed or frozen, or there's some other criteria that hasn't been met, or a requisition has not been created for them. And the reason I was doing that is because when we look at the create position process or the workflow, we'll see that there's so many of them, right? And I wanted to know, based on a previously created position, which business process has been used, so I could modify it to remove the approvals now, like because we're in a training environment. But I see that Logan does not have access to that field. Usually when you go to the related actions, under business process, there should be another tab or another menu that allows you to see the business process that actually ran. And I don't see that here. So it's under business process. Because now I want to create a position under human resources, but if I look at all the create position workflows, we'll see that there's so many. So I'm going to abbreviate create position, and we see create position for global modern services, and then we see a bunch of other ones. So I'm hoping the one that's going to be used is this one, the global position for create position for GMS. So I'm going to look at, so this is what's called a business process. And this has all the steps that when you create a position, it goes through. Okay. So I see that someone could initiate it, and then the initiator groups are listed here at the top. So HR admin, HR partner, recruiter, these groups could initiate, and then it will go to the HR partner for review. And then it also goes to the HR partner to update the change org assignments. So change org refers to the department, company, and the region. So this step, wherever you see change org, it means, this is the step where you could update those 3 fields. And so that's also the HR partner, and then it goes to the HR administrator, which is good because the HR administrator is Logan. And so I see that business process was defined for global modern services, and under GMS organization, there was the executive management group. So this organization, like if we create a position under this one, then I know that it's going to go through the business process that we saw. So I'm going to go through So under this group, I will go down to staffing to start creating that position. So staffing, create position. So there's reasons that companies use to define when they're creating position. And these are based on the values that are maintained in a lookup table. And that lookup table is maintained by the HRIS or the HRIT team. I'm going to put my initials. Here is the earliest date that this position will be available. We could past date this, earliest hire date, today and forward. No job restrictions. We could click that or not. Job family. These are not required. It just helps in reporting. So, but if you select a job family, then the list of job profile narrows based on the job family that's selected. So let's see if there's a training job family. There it is. So now it shows me, what are the job profiles available underneath that. So I'm going to choose instructor. So we see here in this system, these fields are not required, but a lot of companies have made these required. So you have the ability to configure it one way or the other. All right, so coming back to creating the position, there is a question came up in chat. Can you show us how to update the list of values? So there's a different menu every time I do that. And the menu for that is not on top of my mind right now. So would you mind putting that in our discussion board, and I'll make sure I have it, and I'll look up the menu path for it. Okay. There was another question: is can the job description not flow from the job profile selected? It can, if I had selected. If I had selected the one that does have it. So the description that I entered up here, we do want, we don't want to do double entry. So whatever we had selected at the job profile, it should flow. I probably selected one that doesn't have one, or the configuration, there's a configuration that do you want data to flow from the profile to the position. And actually, I'll navigate to that so I can show you where that is as well. But yes, normally, if the job profile has a description or a summary description, it would flow over here, as well as these fields, because we saw these fields on the job profile as well. So now it says up next, and fortunately, it's still Logan McNeil. And in your tenant, based on how the business process is defined, it might be a different person. So in that case, you'll say start proxy, and then you'll put in that person's name, and then you could act on behalf of that person. So I'm going to click open. So yeah, while I could click open, this information is also available under the inbox. It will take us to the same place. So here I have to enter the company, which defaulted in from the soup org. This also defaulted in from the supervisory organization, and the region did as well. And there's couple of other organization types which we typically don't use, but they have here in our training tenets, and definitely could be used, but you could put values in them, but they're not required. I'm curious what we have under COVID-19. And then it's the review step. So basically, one place to see all of the data that has been entered. So now this position is created. And we see that it has 2 positions in it. And here the positions are 786 and 787. So, and then on the integration ID, like even position 1 and 2, for if there's an integration purposes, they have separate IDs as well. So you see them from integration IDs and view IDs area. So in our last tenet, we're talking about like how do you manage like 2 different openings for the same position. So you create the position once, but in actuality, you actually end up creating 2 different positions, -1 and -2. So some of that definition, I'm going to give you this menu, is called edit tenant setup, and then you have different areas. So most of the HCM stuff is under HCM, but you also see there's different areas as well as security, workloads, assistant, integration. So let's go under HCM, and there will be, that's where we define some of the things as far as data flowing from job profile to position. Okay. So first thing that we see here is the ID sequence generators. So the sequence for candidate ID is defined in this sequence. So if I click on that, there is a sequence for applicant IDs. So the ID for that position is defined here. So let me click on this one. So basically, it gives us the formula to use. It says increment by 1, padding, 5, and then there should be a P. It should always have P, and then whatever that sequence is going to be. So this sequence has been defined for all of the positions. Correct. So here's the sequence for employee ID. So let's see what that is. So it's just increments by 1. I don't see any other format syntax. So it's just whatever the sequence is going to be. Okay, so under job requisitions, there is this one choice over here that says default job description and job description summary from job profile. So we do see that this is checked. So that means if there was information in the job profile, it would flow over to the it would flow over to the requisition. This edit tenant HCM, and there's a lot to explore over here. And so go ahead in, or other like org chart. Do we want to show continued workers and open positions within the org chart? So you have the option of unclicking those. And then if you want to hide someone or hide, if there's things that you want to hide from the org chart, or what's allowed to be hidden. So a lot of stuff over here to explore. But I'm gonna go ahead and hit cancel. I see that in this tab there's Workday Assistant has been set up. Workday Assistant is like a little chat bot, but it's usually an icon down here. There's someone who said they work in a company that has Workday implemented. Have someone seen that chatbot? So I'm getting off track, but I was curious to see. Oh yeah. So yeah, this tenant does not have it set up. It still says you must subscribe to the innovation services. That is a new chatbot functionality. I was just really curious about that. Okay. Anyways, so we have created 2 positions. We created them in this org, and now we should see that they're not under staffing yet. The position that we created, they're under unavailable to fill. Here's the training manager 1 and 2 that we created, because a requisition must be created for them. So I'm going to go ahead and create a requisition. I hope it's because the requisition needs to be created. I could put an existing one. See if here's a position that's already ready, so I don't have to create a requisition. Okay. So from that position, when it's ready to go, obviously, if a company is using a recruiting system, then the candidate applies to the requisition, and then it goes through the review process, and then you'll automatically get all of that candidate information as part of their employee record. But you could also go to the position and hire directly. So it says I must search for an existing pre-hire in order to do the hire, or I could create a new pre-hire. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So I have to enter the source. And I have to give a name. And then contact information is also required. At least one piece of contact information. So whether it's going to be an address or an email address. So I'll just say bugsbunny@gmail.com. So obviously in real life, you'll put in all of this information. But technically, to get beyond this step is you just need one piece of contact info. So I have this as a pre-hire, and I'm going to click OK. So now I could hire, so I cannot hire them in the past before the position existed. So if I were to put 01/01/2020, I should get an error. Yeah, so it says select a hire date that is on or after the earliest hire date, and select a hire date that is on or after the recruiting start date. So I'll just change this to 06/13. So this person is a new hire. against a new position, and Bugs Bunny is going to be the new CTO. Okay. Now, one thing we did not do was to check the hire business process to see who is going to flow to next, and to make sure I have those roles. So depending on how that process is defined, if I hit submit, it might get stuck. Like if it needs to go to someone else to approve, and since I can't proxy, it won't get stuck there. And then in that case, I'll modify, we'll do a new hire, but let me go ahead and hit submit. Yeah. Okay, so it does go to Logan to do a background check, and I'm sure there's a lot of other steps which are part of recruiting. I'm going to try to skip as many of them as I can, so we could see that person created. Okay, compensation hire. So proposed compensation. So this is their salary information. It will take me to their salary screen for the new hire. So I see this detail is defaulted in because it's coming from the data that was on the requisition, or on the position actually. So we could definitely modify this. And then we see that this person got a car allowance by default. It showed up over here. And then down here, this person was automatically assigned a merit plan of 3% annual merit, and they were also assigned a bonus plan. So I'm going to cover these plans, these compensation items in the next in tomorrow's session, but I do want you to, the concept I'm going to talk about is here we see that this plan, bonus executive, this plan got defaulted to him automatically, right? I do not have to do an, I could edit it, but the system automatically knew which plan to assign to him. So that's called compensation defaulting. And obviously the businesses, they all want things to default. So I'm going to show you how to create the eligibility rules so that the right bonus plan defaults when you do the hire. And we're going to do that using eligibility criteria. And so this isn't a good example of what I'm going to show you tomorrow. Like in the system, there's a lot of different bonus plans, but only the bonus plan that met the criteria for this plan showed up over here. So that is a biggie. We should learn how to do that tomorrow. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and hit submit from the comp screen. Let's see what this warning message is. It says total base pay is below pay range minimum. And the reason it's showing us this message is because there is a grade or grade profile that defines what the min, mid, and the max for the pay range is. And then the salary that I edited, I made it go below that. So these are the edits alerts that have been defined. Okay, good. So we were able to get past that. So the next step is to request one-time payment. So if this person is getting a sign-on bonus, you could enter that here. So sign-on bonus is an example of a one-time payment. So I wonder if it's called sign-on or hire bonus. Yeah, signing bonus. And then you enter the particular amount. And then this will, if they have Workday payroll implemented, then it will flow to payroll. Otherwise, there has to be a notification set up or some kind of report or integration that will take this data to the payment system. Okay. Next would be stock grant entry. So we enter the stock plan. And then you enter how many stock units. So even though companies typically use a separate app or application or separate vendor for stock management, but you do maintain some stock information within Workday, especially for new hires. So I see the new hire reason is actually not listed here, or maybe it was under a separate category. So I'll show you guys the business process after I complete this hire, if we don't run out of time. Okay. Okay, so here's a probationary setup. Looks like it did not have a proper condition on it because I was doing a US hire. So ideally in that business process, there should be a condition rule. Okay, so we have successfully hired Bugs Bunny in one of the positions that we had for CTO. And then now I could click on Bugs Bunny and I could see his details. So let me put that in a new tab. Okay, so Bugs Bunny reports to Steve Morgan. He is in, the job profile that we had selected. So all of the data that's here, his hire date, and his compensation, the salary data. We could click on the compensation tab so it's a little bit easier to view. The total base pay, allowance, and this comp data at the bottom, like any of the plans that are assigned to him. So he was assigned the bonus plan with a 40% annual. There was a merit plan. So when I went through that hire process, we saw this, and I had a chance to edit that information. And then, once I got through the whole hire process, the information is shown over here. Some companies may have chosen not to show bonus or stock or any of the other plans down here. So this is a choice that companies make whether they want to have something under the plan assignments or not. Okay, so Bugs Bunny has been created successfully. Let me go to his job, and under worker history, I want to show you guys this is the business process that we went through. And if you need to make any corrections, like, hey, oh, this person is not, so I could go over here and I could say correct business process, or I could even rescind it. So, okay, this person is not going to start at all. So in that case, we don't want any record of him in our system as an employee. So I'm going to rescind. If I rescind, Bugs Bunny's pre-hire record will still stay in Workday, but his record as an employee will be purged. And then we could correct it. So I'm going to correct the date. So I'm going to say June 15th. Sorry, 15th, not 5. Now you cannot correct everything when you're hiring. So in that case, you will have to rescind and start over, but there's a lot of things that you can correct. Oh, I have to enter a comment. Okay. So I corrected it. So this next step is what's called onboarding. So this goes to the employee himself or herself, and then the employee fills this portion out. But we're not going to get into the onboarding right now. I'm still looking for the business process name that that we went through. And I was hoping for somehow it would show up here under business process, but it's not showing me that. And that's really helpful for troubleshooting. So I'll take a screenshot from my tenant and show it to you guys in Taurus tenant. Because what happens is something will go wrong in the business process, and you'll get a help desk ticket that says, hey, we need to figure out why something happened. And then you have to figure out, okay, in order to figure that out, you need to know exactly which business process or workflow this transaction went through. Oh yeah, view definition. So I'm sorry. For some reason, I was looking for business process, but it's actually here under view definition. And it tells me that the BP I went through is called Hire for Global Modern Services. Okay. So the menu name was actually view definition. And these are the steps we went through when we hired. Okay. So this right here, this column, are the conditions. And when we talk about the business processes, we'll go into that in more detail. But we see that all of the steps were assigned to HR partner or compensation partner, which in our case, we're lucky that Logan was set up as the compensation partner as well. So we do not have to proxy as other people to go through this process. We could also download this, export into Excel. So for our documentation purposes, what are the steps for each, business process? And then, a lot of times we have to send that to our SOX audit people because they want to see what are our controls on the process. So let me see who the payroll administrator is. I mean, I'm not going to be able to proxy as that person, but in order to see who that is, you could go on the related actions, those three dots, and see a new tab. And then it says view user-based security group. And then the members are listed here. So these are the members of the payroll group. Betty Lou, and I think I could actually log in as Betty Lou. Actually, Logan is a payroll, so yeah, this should be sitting on her inbox.
So in this situation, will then the inbox be flooded for all of them?
Yes. So all of them will have this step.
And how would they know who is supposed to do it? I mean, it becomes that much more confusing, right?
Yeah. So the first person to act on it will make it disappear from the rest of the folks inbox.
Understood. Okay. But it will flood the entire group.
Correct.
Okay.
So what I have done in the past is, one type of group that has a lot of members is recruiters, because you have recruiters in each country. So you may want to put some kind of condition on it that, hey, if the requisition is in the US, then send it to a US recruiter group.